Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. Our salute to Detroit's Black history concludes today with a man who has achieved several firsts in the field of music. George Shirley is a familiar name to opera lovers and concertgoers all over the world. He's also a history maker. After graduating from Wayne State University in 1955 with a degree in music education, Shirley became the first black high school music teacher in the Detroit public schools. A year later, he was drafted into the Army and became the first African American to sing with the prestigious U.S. Army Chorus. That's when he discovered a love for opera, and in 1961, Shirley became the first African American tenor to earn a contract with the Metropolitan Opera in New York City. I'm pleased to have George Shirley here as my guest today. Welcome to American Black Journal, or I should say welcome back. You have been here before. You're a familiar face, not just to everyone else, but to us here at American Black Journal.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm reading that intro, and there's one first after another first after another first. You really were a trailblazer, though, in that field, and particularly of opera, classical music. Tell me, at what point in your life as a child did you figure this was the life for you?
I knew early on that whatever I would accomplish, whatever I would do in life, would be in some way associated with music. I started singing with my parents when I was 4 years old.
Really?
I was born in Indianapolis, and my mother had a beautiful soprano voice. My dad played 3 instruments all by ear and sang a little bit. And we used to sing at churches in and around Indianapolis. My mother would also, in addition to singing, she would recite poetry, and I would sing a solo and maybe recite a little poem of some sort. So it started early.
Yeah.
My parents started me studying piano when I was 5. We moved to Detroit when I was 6. And I became involved in the music programs in the public schools, which at that time were phenomenal.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely phenomenal. By the 6th grade, if you had any ability at all, you could read music.
Yeah, yeah.
And I continued singing in church. And in high school, my senior year, I decided, with the help of my high school music teacher, Northern High, to go to Wayne University and pursue a career in music education.
Yeah, yeah. When you were a child, I mean, first of all, talking about the Detroit public schools at that time, we were talking about a very different system than we have now. But was it that they were teaching all children?
I think
music?
Practically every school, every elementary school in Detroit, I believe, had a music teacher who had his or her dedicated classroom space, and students went to that teacher once a week.
Right. And
as I said, by the time I was in 6th grade, I mean, we could read music.
Yeah.
In junior high school, I went to Sherrard Junior High. We had an excellent choir. And at Northern High, a phenomenal choir.
Right.
Every Christmas, we sang Messiah. I had my first experience singing tenor solos in Messiah when I was in the 10th or 11th grade at Northern. My first experience singing anything from the Verdi Requiem, the first chorus was on one of our spring concerts, and I sang the tenor solos in that. All of that, during that time, I didn't think of a life as a professional musician. I knew that I would continue to sing in Detroit, but I was focused on becoming a music teacher.
Right,
and so that was my thrust when I went to Wayne.
To Wayne.
Opera at that time was not an option. The only opera we listened to in my household was Saturday night Grand Ole Opry. My mother was from Arkansas, and she loved country music. I thought opera, grand opera, I thought it was sort of silly, actually.
Yeah, well, but singing Verdi's Requiem, for instance, in high school is
the
right
Requiem
in
and
that,
Messiah are both oratorios, and it's so-called classical music.
Sure.
I also studied. My parents started me studying voice when I was 13, so I learned art songs, some German lieder. I cringe at what passed for German coming out of my mouth at that time.
Right.
But spirituals were a strong force in my life.
Yeah.
Gospel less so, but spirituals. And so when I went to Wayne, It was music education and a lot of choral music. I sang a lot of choral music.
Right.
And opera, it just wasn't
That wasn't your thing.
on my radar. I had a good friend, Thurman Bailey, who was a great opera lover, and Thurman would ask me whenever the Metropolitan Opera or the New York City Opera would come to town, "Hey, do you have your tickets?" I said, "No, man,
I'm not doing that.
Interested in going down there and seeing a lot of corpulent folks standing around with spears in their hands and you know, helmets.
Right.
You know, if I want to hear if I want to hear music, vocal music, I'll go to a song recital or a choral concert.
Yeah, yeah.
And I also liked symphonic music because I played euphonium.
Okay.
In the
I'm a big
community
fan of the
church
euphonium.
band.
I was a tuba player,
All
so
right.
it's the same family,
That's
right?
right.
Bottom of the register.
That's right. And I played in the band at Wayne. But opera was just, it was not something that I was interested in.
So it's not until you get to the Army then that,
Right.
that you even think about that. And what is it about having been in the Army and the U.S. Army Chorus that turns you on to the idea of opera?
Let me go back just a little bit. When in my senior year at Wayne, the Glee Club director, Harry Langsford, came to me. He said, "You know, I want to perform Stravinsky's Oedipus Rex."
Okay.
Oedipus Rex is termed by Stravinsky an opera oratorio because of the way it's staged, very stylized, very little movement. And it's a great piece for a male chorus and soloists. So Harry asked me, he said, "Would you take a look at the score and look at the role of Oedipus?" And I did, and so I wound up singing that role in my senior year at the Bonstell Theater.
Okay.
It was, I sang the piece subsequently with Stravinsky years later and recorded it with him. And I did a number of professional performances of it, but the Wayne University production was the one of all the productions that I ever performed that was the most true to the score, to what Stravinsky asked for. So I had had my first semi-operatic career experience, but it didn't speak to me as a way of life. It did combine the two things that I was interested in, because I remember telling my wife before I got out of the Army, when I go back to Detroit to resume teaching, I'll look up a little amateur acting group because I'd like to do some acting. Not thinking that opera combined the two things.
It's acting
so
and singing.
In the Army, I was surrounded by guys who, some of whom were having careers and had them interrupted by the draft or going to have them. And a couple of friends of mine spoke to me, and one fellow in particular convinced me to go and study with his teacher a couple of months before I was due to get out of the Army. This old teacher was teaching privately. He had been an operatic tenor. And so just to get my friend off my back, I said, "Okay, I'll go and sing this."
All right.
And the fellow looked at me and he said, "If you study with me 1 year, I can guarantee you'll have a career." Well, no one had ever said that to me before in Detroit or anyplace else. And so I went back home and I told my wife, I said, "What this old fellow said to me." And she made the second mistake she ever made in her life. She said, "Well, okay, whatever you want to do is all right with me." So I decided, okay, if I go back to Detroit and resume my teaching career, and I have a really talented student, what am I going to tell them about the business? Because I have absolutely no idea of what it is to be a professional singer, a professional opera singer, certainly. So I figured, okay, I'll give it 2 years. In 2 years' time, I'll know whether it's something I can do.
Whether I can do this or not.
And if it doesn't work out, I will have learned things that would then make me possibly a better teacher. So I decided to do so. I extended my period of service for an extra year so I could have benefits to take care of my wife and an infant daughter, and to study with this old fellow. And about 2 weeks after I decided to do this, I got a telephone call from a woman in New York City. I didn't know anybody in New York City. Her name was Sally Tournow. She said, "I have a small opera company and we perform in Woodstock, New York during the summers. It's a very small company. We have 2 tenors. One of them just canceled. And our bass told me to call you." Well, the bass was our barbarian, who was from Southfield, Michigan. Graduate from the University of Michigan with a law degree, but never used it. A wonderful bass voice, sang eventually at the Metropolitan Opera for about 22 years. And Ara had signed a contract with this company, and when the tenor canceled, he told her to call the woman to call me because he thought I was getting out at that time. I just signed up for an extra year. So anyway, she said, can you come up and audition for us? I said, well, I can't. I just signed up for an extra year, but I'm getting out of the Army next year about this time. I'll be looking for work. She said, well, come up in January and audition for us, and we'll see where it goes. I did. They gave me a contract. And when that happened, after I spoke with her, I hung up the phone, and I looked up. I said, are you trying to tell me something?
Right, this is a sign, right?
It was a sign, and I knew it was absolutely.
Yeah.
When I walked out on stage with this little company up in Woodstock, a little theater that seated about 250 people, we performed at 2 pianos.
Yeah.
I walked out on stage, and I knew I was doing what I was born to do.
And so from there, I mean, you go on to this tremendous career at the Met in New York, first African-American tenor to do that. I mean, it really is a remarkable path that you carved. We've got about a minute left. Tell me about your favorite opera. What's the one that you could play in over and over and over again?
It's hard to choose a favorite. There are a couple of them. La Boheme, in which I made my debut in Italy in 1960. Carmen. I was Don José to Shirley first Carmen. I was the first tenor to be able to kill her on stage.
Right.
Those are two favorite operas, but one that's not that popular, and that's Pelléas et Mélisande.
Okay. I have to admit I have not seen that.
Well, it's not an opera that's done that often, but it's one of my favorite pieces.
Okay. Okay. And what do you tell? So what do you tell people, young people today, about careers in music, about opera? It's not as popular, certainly now, as it once was.
If you've got the hunger to do it, then pursue it. It doesn't matter whether it's popular or not. And if you're going to have a career, you're going to have it. No, because I look at myself.
Yeah.
I didn't plan on this career.
It was almost fated.
I believe that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's true of everyone. If you're going to have a career and you study with something and it doesn't go that way, it's all right, because you will have learned things that you can apply to other areas of life.
Yeah.
That will bring you as much success or even more.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's great to have you here. Obviously, all of Detroit has got real pride in what you've accomplished.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.